Hello, welcome to Off the Shelf Reviews.
I'm Jess.
And I'm Gary. And today we're going to review and discuss The Rock, which came out in 1996 from director Michael Bay. Jess, why don't you give us the synopsis?
Well, The Rock is a story about a renegade group of United States Marines who take The Rock, the former prison on Alcatraz Island, and actively move against the US government by seizing VX rockets and setting up on the island and threatening the local population while also holding people prisoner there. And the government try to stop them with more Marines who fail, but eventually you'll find out a unlikely hero in the form of a FBI chemicals expert played by Nick Cage and a former British SAS commander played by Sean Connery save the day.
Welcome to The Rock.
So this is from legendary producers Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer. And this was similar to Top Gun.
Yes.
This was a half-baked script. It was a script that wasn't finished. It was so many pages long, I think about 80 pages. At one point, the script was even given to Arnold Schwarzenegger, who read it and just went, this is an unfinished script. There's notes and scribbles all over it, so no, I'm not doing it.
It's got a lot of producers to it.
There's a lot of producers. I mean, this script also went through 6 different writers. Quentin Tarantino is even uncredited, as he also touched up the script here and there.
You can tell it's a bit of deep script because while we were comparing for this, I was just chuckling at the length of the character list, and it is kind of drawn out. Where people have been, there's clearly a lot of detail been added in by a lot of people, and if you look, all the characters have their breathing room. It's a quite long film.
It's 2 hours 15 minutes in length. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty meaty action film, which is long for this, what you consider the action film. I suppose the better ones are longer.
I don't know, the 90s had some of the best action films of all time. It was a great decade for action movies. And Michael Bay at this point had only really done Bad Boys.
Which again was produced by the same team.
Yes.
And was also arguably a very good film.
Sadly as well, this was also the last time, the film is dedicated to Don Simpson, who tragically passed away during the making of this film, which deeply affected all of those that were making the film.
Yeah, I think it was in post. It was in later production, but yeah.
Well, they were still filming, and apparently they tried to keep the news away from Michael Bay until the end of the day, but the news still got to him anyway. But this was a troubled shoot as well. I believe Disney were the producers or the financiers for the film.
Yeah, they were.
And they weren't, of course, too happy with them making an R-rated action movie. And they also didn't have too much faith in Michael Bay to pull it off. At one point, they called Michael Bay off set to the Disney studios to have a meeting with him. And Sean Connery stepped in and went, well, where are you going? To see who? Why? Okay, I'm coming with you. And apparently when Sean Connery turned up at the meeting, all the studio executives were just like, Oh, he is doing a good job. Oh, okay, Sean Connery, go ahead. And Sean Connery was, a mega star. So much so that they even had to construct a cabin on Alcatraz just for Sean Connery so he wouldn't have to travel back and forth from the island every day for the shoots.
Mason, where are you going?
30 years ago I found I wouldn't die in this toilet.
You're not leaving!
This film has, like most of Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer movies, a fantastic intro. It's so engaging immediately from the music, from the atmosphere of the heavy rain.
Hans Zimmer music.
Oh, Hans Zimmer's music as well.
I mean, you always get this is one of the films that kind of sets the sound of Hans Zimmer, because if you you just know it's him from the kind of opening piece of music. It's just beautiful.
It just perfectly fits. And of course, Michael Bay has a history in music videos, video direction. And I have to say, this entire film feels like a massively extended music video with the shot lengths averaging less than 3 seconds a shot.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a lot of ground to cover, which I think benefits Bay in that regard. If his quick cuts, as it were, kind of roll through this story. Because like in the synopsis, you saw me struggle a little. There's so many narrative twists and turns going on, and so many location changes, and there's a base of operations set up at one point, and you see it probably being set up in a dramatic. It's set up by a dramatic truck drive-in, and then you kind of don't see that set properly again for the rest of the film.
Right.
But it looks like they did a massive set sequence for it, and you're just like, man, there's so many amazing set pieces that kind of almost a freeze frame moment where you go, and then you kind of gasp and move on because you can't stop because this film's non-stop.
It is non-stop. Like, the intro, I just love the intro. Like, the first 3 minutes of the film, 4 minutes of the film, it just really gets you in the mood for what's to come.
It also is filled with the odd high-quality zingers.
Yes.
Like, as a sequence of Mason, Sean Connery's character, we probably should say who the characters are. Sean Connery's plays a character called Mason, but we don't meet him until about 30 minutes into the...
About 25 minutes
25
into the
minutes,
film, and he's
yeah.
like one of the leading, or if not the lead character.
Yeah, because he's kind of key to the whole plot
But
as it unfolds.
the film escalates things very well, though, and so it introduces you to these characters. You get to spend a little bit of time with these characters before we move on to all of the key players.
Yeah, and they're coming out with Mason, Sean Connery's character, is just throwing out sass and zingers throughout almost the entire film. There's Cage does as well, but I think Connery wins on the zingers.
Well, it was the fact that most of the script was missing for Nicolas Cage's character, and so he improvised and came up with a lot of the lines. It was also Nicolas Cage who decided that his character doesn't swear. So he literally just mutes himself when he's about to have a swear word, although he does swear like once, I think, in the film.
He's playing the Boy Scout to some
Yes,
extent.
the good guy.
He's enjoying playing
The innocent in that regard. He's an FBI agent who is a biochemist. He's a super freak when it comes to it, actually. And his introduction is again another tense moment where they're opening this box, they're pulling things out, and then all of a sudden his co-worker starts playing with a doll, and this poisonous gas erupts out of it, and it starts eating through their suits, and you have that great line where he's been told to take this needle and stab himself in the heart.
Look how big this is. You want me to stick this into my heart? Are you fucking nuts?
And again, you've got, like, it sounds funny when the character says it. You want me to stick this in my heart? Are you fucking nuts?
He's got a trainee lab assistant with him who's screaming at them. Well, Cage is like, get that fucking needle away from him. Then that's only
The sprinkler system's
his
not
only
working.
swear in the film, I think,
Yes,
is when he
yeah.
tells him to get... Because his colleague's holding this needle, and his other colleagues just swearing at his other colleagues who are outside the chamber, like, you want me to put that in there? It's just like... and the thing is, this film's really interesting because that sequence follows on from unrelated scenes initially.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with the first, as we said, about 30 minutes of the film, is jumping back and forth between Ed Harris, who's General Hummel, who's a disenfranchised United States Marine, super decorated. He's the mega general, basically.
But he's gone rogue.
Yeah, he's dissatisfied with Black Ops missions, leaving men unnamed and unhonoured behind lines because of secrecy and classification of missions in regions where they weren't meant to be because they're illegal operations.
It's all based on our reality as well.
Yeah, I mean, this film was had some issues because it was tied into the famous lies wrapped around the weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist in Iraq. And this film obviously got tied up in that knot with us publicly not knowing the truth at the time. Then when it came out, the film was like, oh, they had to make changes. And that's part of the thing where the script got itself more tied in knots because with edits and post-edits, it just got very messy.
But it's an interesting thing to have. I mean, Ed Harris is a wonderful actor as well.
Ed Harris
he was always having discussions with Michael Bay on how to develop this character and flesh this character out and make it meaningful, so that you don't have a villain that is just super villainy.
And it isn't. I mean, the finale really wraps up the point where you kind of... We don't want to jump the gun, actually. While Ed Harris is building his character through the story arc, you kind of do see his thought process and understand his morality, because he isn't the bad guy. There are a couple of slightly villainous United States Marine captains who team up with Ed Harris.
Well, he hires other soldiers that he's worked with under his command, but he also hires a string of mercenaries to fill out his squad.
Yeah, there's two others. One of them's played by Tony Todd, Captain Darrow, and the other one's played by...
There's David Morse, played by who plays Major Tom Baxter, and David Morse is just a brilliant actor as well. Remember him mostly from The Green Mile.
There are two captains, one of which is played by Tony Todd, who are the sort of villains of the piece because they're two, as Gary said, sort of mercenary outside of his friendship circle, should we say, as the general.
Yeah, they're very
Reckless.
trigger happy.
Yes.
They just want the money. They don't care if they kill hundreds of thousands of people with this horrible poisonous gas. And so Ed Harris is kind of going to keep those characters in line.
Yes.
Whilst he's also threatening the government to pay all of the families whose loved ones that served in the military have gone unrewarded with no medals, and no financial support to those families. And so that's why he's bitter and angry and has seized Alcatraz, holding all of the tourists there hostage.
87 hostages, I think. And obviously by the point we get to, he seizes 15 VX rockets from the US military supplies.
It's also just another great action sequence, it's almost military porn in a way, watching this perfectly executed plan. And there's one thing that you do notice as well, is that it's a non-lethal takedown of this facility. They're using tranquilizers, and they're using like rubber ball bearings and things, so that they're not killing any of these soldiers. Beanbags, right.
Because you actually cut to kind of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the President at some points. The President, I think, kept quite low-key until he has one epic speech near the end. But they kind of talk about how it was a brutal yet non-lethal assault on this facility, and it just hammers home that again, Ed Harris's general is driven, but not lost his kind of moral compass in his path.
Absolutely, yeah. And so this is why now the FBI need an expert. They need a chemical expert. And so they get hold of Stanley Goodspeed, who of course has just found out that he's about to be a dad, and he's a bit upset with the state of the world, but he gets called in anyway. He gets sent to San Francisco.
This isn't happening.
Ghost, you're not answering.
This isn't happening.
No, just don't answer. It's okay.
Prior to this, the FBI chief receives a direct phone call from Ed Harris's general, who it's odd, that sequence. And I feel like that's where this one point in the script where I was just like, why would he have the number like almost directly to the FBI, head of the FBI? And why the head of the FBI? Surely you'd want to go straight to the Joint Chiefs, because I know it's an internal. I'm not an expert.
Michael Bay said this of the movie, that if you start to see holes in the movie, you're supposed to switch that part of your brain off and go, it's an action movie.
That's Michael Bay's entire brand, I guess.
If the film's making you think too much, it should over some political issues, but at the same time, it's an action movie. And so when I review action movies, I kind of forgive it of some of its, the shortfalls of movie making, because you're here to watch the spectacle of it all. The fact that this film accompanies that spectacle with good everything else, good performances, good writing, good line delivery.
Well, like you're talking about good acting in terms of John Spencer, who does play the director of the FBI. He's also a secondary villain of sorts as well.
In a way, to the John Mason character,
exactly,
who we get introduced to now, of course, as you said, played by Sean Connery, who has been incarcerated for 3 decades. And it's because, as we find out throughout the film, he's pretty much an innocent man. He is a British secret agent who got captured at the Canadian border and locked away without trial. And it's because he has stolen a canister of microfilm, which shows the Roswell landing, the JFK assassinations.
It shows the alien landing. The head of the FBI saying this to one of his colleagues, and you're just like, what? And it's J. Edgar Hoover's
secret film.
Yeah, to blackmail British prime ministers.
Yeah.
The MPs and the Commons.
And so that's it's just fantasy stuff.
It's a wonderful little nugget of crazy fantasy. And it's like, oh. And it's just like, well, they held him until we were going to hold him until he gave up the film.
But again, the visuals, the cinematography, it all feels like music video again, with the quick cuts of the keys dropping, the chains, the dishevelled look. It's one of the things that Ed Harris said of Michael Bay, was that Ed Harris always felt like he was acting with his whole body, yet Michael Bay is like camera in your face, like he's just looking for snippets to tell the story. And so, granted, some of the performances, you're not seeing all of it, but the shots that were given tell the story perfectly. And just watching him get dragged into the interrogation room, and watching the first agent just have no luck with him whatsoever. And so they have to send in Nicolas Cage.
Well, I'm Stanley Goodspeed.
But of course you are.
Who is, of course, a rookie when it comes to this kind of work.
But he's also quite intellectual, which is more on the Mason...
Or philosophical as well.
Yeah, and that's immediately Mason's just seeing through the game. And
well, there's an unconfirmed fan theory that Mason, Sean Connery, is James Bond, who was on a mission and then disappeared.
I know that's a good one. Yeah.
And like he actually says one of his James Bond lines to Stanley Goodspeed when he comes in and says, "I'm Stanley Goodspeed, FBI," and he says, "But of course you are."
Hi, I'm Plenty.
But of course you are.
And at a certain point, who trained you? The British, Her Majesty's Secret Service. He says at another point.
Yeah.
So it is again a nice. They're clearly tongue in cheek with it.
The thing is, if he really was James Bond, then the Mason character would actually be about 86 at this point. So you're just like, well, it doesn't quite work, but as a fantasy, you can just kind of go, it's James Bond.
Yeah, it is a really. I mean, there's just so many good bits with it. And like we said, the interaction between Goodspeed and Mason are really good. I think
Yes.
Cage and Connery really.
Sean Connery
shine.
also signed on to the project when he knew that Nicolas Cage was going to be playing Goodspeed. And yeah, the chemistry between them both is really good. They're back and forth, and it's usually just Sean Connery schooling Nicolas Cage's character throughout the film. There's only one reversal of it midpoint in the film.
May I also suggest a haircut?
Am I out of style?
Unless you're a 20-year-old guitarist from Seattle. It's a grunge thing.
Grunge.
So we then get introduced to one of my favorite actors, Michael Biehn. You know, absolutely fantastic in The Terminator, one of the most memorable characters in the Aliens franchise. And I guess he's just unfortunate. He's typecast as a Marine or a soldier in almost every role.
Yeah, a very. It's like he's being. I don't know. He plays a good soldier. I mean,
He said that when he was on set, he felt incredibly intimidated, though, because Michael Bay hired real Navy SEALs to fill out the squad, and the fact that he also had Sean Connery there, and the fact that he is the head of the Navy SEALs delivering these lines to actual Navy SEAls, he just felt a little bit like intimidated by it, but you can understand him. Really.
Yeah, his character, Commander Charles Mason, was the head of the counter-strike team.
Yes.
So they were the ones going in to stop Ed Harris's Marines. Because they were at this point, they were trying to come up. You're bouncing back and forth from different rooms of different very important people. And they're like, right, we've got to get thermite attached to rockets to essentially super napalm the island.
It's the only way to dissolve the toxic gas that they've got, the VX
to stop
gas.
it even forming a cloud and rolling over San Francisco. So they're like, right, we need to liquefy, superheat, lava-wise, the whole of this island. And that's one option. The other option is obviously to deploy a Marine squad straight into the island through tunnels that have only ever been escaped by one man. And that's Mason, which we hadn't explained. Mason has been imprisoned all this time in various Supermax prisons around the United States, including, at one point, before they closed it, this famous island, the Rock. So he escaped them all, except apparently the last one, where he's currently held, and as you meet him at the beginning of the film. So they're hoping to get him to help them get through. But the FBI director, who sort of does play a secondary villain, because he isn't a bad guy, and they don't have some sort of execution of him like there's no death sequence for him. He's just dangled off a roof at one point early in the film when they finally just take him out of prison and take him to San Francisco into a hotel, and he's pissed at Mason for the rest of the film, but he's obviously quite a key integral kind of character in helping kind of plan and strategize. So they finally get Mason to work with them so they can deploy a Marine squad with, surprising for the poor biochemist who doesn't want to go along, Goodspeed.
Have you ever been in a combat situation?
Define combat, sir.
An incursion underwater to retake an impregnable fortress held by an elite team of U.S. Marines in possession of 81 hostages and 15 guided rockets armed with VX poisoned gas.
Because Goodspeed's a reluctant hero, which is
of course,
a classic trope. But
that's a great moment when Michael Biehn turns to one of his soldiers and he's like, "Define combat." And Nicolas Cage just runs off and vomits in the sink, and you're just like, it's understandable, it's believable.
Yeah.
It makes the characters feel that a little bit more real.
Because Goodspeed up to that point is trying to brief them on how to disarm these and take out the control gems and what they're dealing with. And they're like, nah, we'll bring you can do it. It's just like, no.
Let's go back, though, to the San Francisco chase sequence, because as you said, Mason throws the FBI agent off the balcony and then makes his escape. He ends up hijacking a Humvee and driving through San Francisco, literally demolishing the town as he goes through it. And then, of course, Stanley Goodspeed ends up taking a Ferrari and chasing him through town.
Bright yellow Ferrari. And it's, again, Goodspeed's pissed up to this point because everyone's like joking he's not a real FBI
He also
agent,
got punched in the face pretty brutally.
and he forgot his gun because it's home in his socks drawer, and so he's a lab monkey.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I just do lab stuff. It's just like, why have I got to go do any of this dramatic? But this sequence, you kind of realise Goodspeed is a pretty competent.
He's trying now.
Yeah,
yes.
he's rusty, shall we say? And
Yeah,
that's the thing. Like the head of the director says at one point, when did you last wield a gun outside of the academy?
Never.
Never.
Now, Michael Bay has said that this is the biggest clusterfuck in his entire filmmaking career. Where he said that, you know, in order to lock down like 2 streets in San Francisco to do this shoot, took like 2,000 signatures. And then, of course, by the time they got all those signatures lined up and ready to go, some of them had already expired, and it was just a mess, and they just struggled to get it done. Apparently, lots of stern words were said to lots of different people in order to get this shoot done. But it is pretty epic. You know, the music's thundering in. You got these shots of cars flying over the hills, over the road. And it's just the destruction. You know, you've got the obligatory car riding through the fruit stand, you know, riding through the water barrels.
Derail a tram in the finale sequence. There's a massive gas explosion.
The Ferrari gets destroyed.
Everything gets destroyed. I mean, at that point you kind of go, he's lost him. And as you see Mason make off. But they have just got mobile phone technology. And Mason, which is a nice little touch, because throughout this you got Mason, at least the first... Mason comes in half an hour in, but for the first half of the kind of Mason sequence of the film, you got him referencing he doesn't know what's going on because he's been incarcerated for about 30 years. So he's surprised when the phone rings in his stolen Humvee, and it's like, oh, it's a car phone.
Hello?
Which again is a little bit dated now because you wouldn't have a car phone, but Godspeed does flick out his own personal phone after he hijacks a motorcycle after his Ferrari explodes, and he keeps track of Mason, and he actually does track down Mason, which after this fantastic surreal chase through San Francisco, which is brilliant.
Goodspeed figures out that Mason is trying to contact his estranged daughter. And he's
which appears he had when he broke out of jail at one point.
Yes,
which is the best bit. It's one of those moments you just chuckle because you had to figure it out. Because at one point it's like, but she's only so old, and he's been in jail for 30 years. She isn't 30. It's just like no, she's more like in her 20s. Because at some point when he broke out, and then they recaptured him, because she speaks of all the federal agents showing up to incarcerate him. It was just so good.
Again, it's just another one of those moments that just makes the characters, a little bit more three-dimensional. And it's a great moment where Goodspeed finally catches up to him and says, I'm sorry, we need to take your father away. He's working with us as a member of the FBI. And it's not like, we're taking him back to jail.
He's being very kind. And it was
a nice moment, which is also appreciated by Mason.
Thank you for that. You could have handled it differently.
What do you say we cut the chit-chat? A-hole! You almost got me killed twice, and my jaw hurts like hell.
Yeah, and it is good. It's the building of the kind of chemistry between those two characters.
Yeah.
And it shows that they're on the same team and they're essentially good guys, which again makes sense for like why Mason trusts Goodspeed near the end. And the building of friendship through the film.
Now, Michael Bay said that the original script for this film was a lot more serious in tone. And because the script wasn't entirely finished as well, a lot of the dialogue was ad-libbed, and apparently almost like most of the humor in the film was ad-libbed, and he left it in there because it kind of worked. Now, there is also like a plethora of side characters or non-characters in the film that are just there for the comical moments, like the stylist. When he's in the elevator and he's like, "Are you just happy with your haircut?"
Yeah.
You've got the tram conductor that giving the tours, and he's like, "Oh my baby, I'm gonna kill this person who destroyed my tram. I'm gonna hunt him down everywhere."
Abandoned, every man for himself. Yeah. It's just like abandoned tram, and you got these people jumping off.
Yeah, you got one of the tourists in Alcatraz locked up. There's just these one-note characters that just says something funny, and you never see them again.
The guy, and the black woman who is critical of him.
Yeah. I'll bring my motherfucking gun.
And that's cool. I mean, like I said, my favourite zinger, which I think is early on by Mason when they're deciding he needs to be sent into Alcatraz with the team, is you're stuck between a rock and a hard case.
Yes.
Yeah, a rock and a hard case. It's just I just chuckled because these little zingers do keep propping up. I mean, and that's the thing. I think when I say they're quality, they're just perfectly. They don't go too far. Nothing's psychotically laugh out loud.
No, it's the one of the best uses of one-liners. It
I
really
know,
is.
I think it is, and I think this is the thing with it fitted with the way this film works, and it reminds me again. I go back to one of my other favourite Bay films, which is Bad Boys. Again, it's the pacing of comedy diced with serious drama, which again it
makes
the
the
walks
whole
that
thing,
line.
It makes it so much more entertaining as well.
Yeah, you need to feel
connected
while also feeling the threat of the scenarios being played out and the severity, which I think this film, because it's the adult targeted audience film, they're actually murdering people. I mean, they don't actually kill any civilians in the film. No, there are lots and lots of deaths, but not...
Well, this is where we now get the whole plan to go and drop the seals off at Alcatraz.
Yeah, because they're desperate because they aren't able to get the rockets
in time.
So they're like, all right, we need to send the boys in.
But we've also seen like the Ed Harris's team have deployed these micro sensors, which I've never seen or heard of before.
Yeah, they're like
motion detectors.
Yeah, because they're not just the laser tripwires with a motion detector built into them.
Yes.
So and they're like, you get a comment throwaway line by John C. McGinley's character, one of the renegade. Have to make it clear, renegade member of the United States Marines. He sets up these kind of trap devices which have apparently never before seen technology in them, which might have meant they were new tech or just made up. But essentially it was a laser tripwire, but it also had a motion sensor. If you try to move the laser tripwire, it triggers an alarm. So the Marines who are breaching don't know that they're kind of got if they even move it, it's going to trigger an alarm.
Well, the thing is, they spot it, don't they? And he
Yes.
actually decides to try and disarm it. But you see him moving the thing around, and he just knocks it, which lets them know that they've been alerted.
Because it doesn't trigger by the laser. They actually trick the laser into not realizing.
They tried to redirect the laser back into the prism to disable it.
Yes.
But they'd already knocked the motion sensor instead.
Yes.
Which triggered the alarm.
But again, up to this point, they've entered by a kind of
that was the
underwater
thing,
sequence, and then you had Mason lead them through the maze of tunnels
which was another great moment. It let you know that he wasn't bluffing when he said that he escaped Alcatraz, especially when he has to go through that fire and all of the moving cogs.
I was going to say that's the one of those moments where I was slightly taken out of it because that's awesome. But what is that?
Right. And that was another thing where you just like, I thought this prison was deactivated. Why are all the boilers and everything still working and operational?
There was an
It's like, don't think of it.
I'm sitting there going, this is Indiana Jones.
Right.
Because he's got like kind of this amazing kind of rolling track to time is dodging through, and it reminds me of all the kind of falling kind of axes and stuff.
And it's punctuated perfectly when he just comes out the other side and opens the door. Welcome to the Rock.
Oh, the gravel of Sean Connery.
Brilliant. But I mean, the entire underwater sequence where we watch the seals get dropped off and move into the underwater section of Alcatraz, Disney wanted to cut it all. They were like, it's going to cost you $60,000 or $600,000 to do this entire sequence. Scrap it. We'll just have them arrive inside Alcatraz.
And that's the one thing I will say for this film. Like I said before, where you have that FBI command center roll into the warehouse and set up base. I think, in retrospect, I do remember the rest of that scene, like the bit where you have Dr. Goose trying to explain what's going on and why he shouldn't be sent. Because this whole kind of FBI command center is set up in this huge warehouse, and I can't imagine that was cheap. But the roll-in setup to it was just beautiful. And they roll in like
it's just the sweeping cameras, the quick edits, and the music. It told you everything you needed to know without wasting time.
The scoring, you're right, because the moment that Sean Connery opens the door and says "Welcome to the Rock," you get
the rush of music again.
The music just dun 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 dun, and just various other
it's slick. It's really well executed, and this leads into, for me, my favourite scene in the movie, the most memorable scene in the movie, and perhaps one of the most memorable moments in action movie history, the shower room sequence.
We're not Americans, but it's a heart punch because in the sense you've got these very patriotic men facing off against each other, and it is a war of ideology, and it just plays out. It is the most censorious sequence in the film, because
Yes.
the rest of it touches upon nobility and betrayal and honor and dishonor, but this sequence just
Yep, they've spilled blood in the same mud.
Yeah.
But he's just like, I can't drop my weapon. I've promised to
Yeah.
defend my country against terrorists, foreign and domestic. And you got Ed Harris just screaming at him, put his guns down. It's like, no one needs to die
Michael
today.
Biehn's commander is having a shouting match because they rise up through a shower room, and because of Trigger the Alarm in it, it's a death trap.
It's a death trap. They've got the high ground.
Yeah.
and the thing is, I'm like, we've also seen Ed Harris and Michael Biehn face off against each other in the past in the Abyss.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, Ed Harris has got the high ground. I know how this is going to end.
Well, no, it wasn't going that way, I think, because the point is Harris is trying to make him stand down.
Yes.
Because it is an unwinnable situation. He doesn't want to do it.
You're down there! We're up here! You walked into the wrong goddamn room, Commander!
Goddamn it, Commander, one last time. You tell your men to safety their weapons, drop them on the deck.
I cannot give that order!
But then some rocks are knocked over
Well,
by one of the Marines.
he deliberately knocks those rocks over. He turns to his mate and he's like, let's waste these fuckers.
Yeah.
Knocks the rock down.
The
The
two
rock hits the
bad
ground.
Marines,
Yeah.
should we say. The two bad Marine captains.
And it's just a slaughter. When the music swells up as well, captures all of that emotion as you're watching the whole team get wiped out. Like, the voices are just muffled.
Yeah.
You can't hear anything over the gunfire and
You've
the
got
bloodshed.
Ed Harris screaming, ceasefire, ceasefire.
You've got
And-
the other soldier in the tunnels wanting to go up and support his team.
Yeah, the last UNC...
It's a massacre.
Yeah, the young Marine who's a member of Bean's team, who's getting slaughtered, goes up, gets slaughtered as well, gets shot in the head, and you get the shock shot of him dropping down with a gunshot wound to the head.
Which ends that sequence, and
Yeah.
you're just like, geez, like, give me time to breathe.
And Mason just grabs his gun and leaves. It's
Yes.
just like, this has gone wrong. And Mason doesn't understand the severity of what's going on in San Francisco at that point.
He doesn't know anything about the rockets or the gas, and so that's where Goodspeed has to try and stop Mason from trying to escape the prison again, but also convince him, like, your daughter's out there, my fiance
He uses
is out
and
there.
it's well written because Mason was blindly angry that his daughter's been put in harm's way without him being told or her being put into safety. But it's like, no, my missus is out there as well. So it's a really nice way to keep them as friends, even though there's a conflict point there if you wanted it to be one.
Yeah.
And as in a sense, he can't do it a one-man army style.
Yes,
They do sort of act as pretty badasses from here on out.
It's almost a buddy cop type formula.
It is, yeah.
Where they're basically schooling each other on the ways to get things done. And, you know, the rest of the film now, like, that was all the setup, really, to now just get these two in Alcatraz to try and disarm these rockets.
It was a really long road to this point in the film. And it is a really good film, but it's one of those... and this is why I said it's quite long, because it's kind of got... it is a true 3-act structure where you've got the setup, the conflict, and then the resolution. It is a long format of that, and it really plays out comfortably. But at that point, you've now got the massacred Marines, and they realise the two of them have
escaped.
survived because they realise the young Marine's missing his gun. They're like, there must be some other rats.
And his comms device as well. And so they start dropping bombs in the sewers. As is a sequence that both Sean Connery and Nicolas Cage didn't want to do, was where they dive under the water with the fire jets explode over them. They're just like, we're not used to this kind of work.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's very effectively shot. The chase sequences, the gun shootouts. There's that moment where they end up shooting, like, this crate above one of the soldiers and drops it down on him.
Oh, yeah.
Whilst he's deactivating the rocket and his legs twitching. And you're like, again, you balance the horrific violence with the comedic
And it's Cage playing...
It's Cage being Cage.
A little bit.
You've been around a lot of corpses. Is that normal?
Well, the feet thing?
Yeah, the feet thing.
Yeah, it happens.
And again, it's this is where people blow Cage's kind of expressive performances out of proportion. He's pretty good at this.
Yes.
And it's pretty damn fine sequences. And his comedy, I think... this is why we always struggle with Nick Cage, because people who don't like him don't like him.
For sure, yeah.
But in this, I think he's the best form of Cage that anybody can enjoy.
I think having Sean Connery there kind of helped restrain him slightly. And
he only explodes once in the film in
Yes.
a psychotic
Nick Cage way.
moment, and the rest of it's in the prison cells when he's
where
held.
they do eventually get captured and they're
Yeah.
put in prison.
Yeah.
And he's just like, how in Zeus's butthole did you get out of your cell?
Yeah, it was just, and there's a punchline to that as well, which again is how they keep all these things rolling.
Trade secrets.
Yeah, trade secrets. Trade secrets.
I take pleasure in gutting you, boy. I'll take pleasure in gutting you, boy.
But again, as they chase through the sewers, through what I will refer to as more Indiana Jones sequences.
Yeah.
Because they land on a cart and it's...
Well, the thing is, it was again like the studio wanted the budget cut with the SEALs infiltrating Alcatraz, but this sequence was drastically budget cut. It was supposed to have been an elaborate minecart chase sequence. They only built like most of the set, which you can still see parts of,
Yes.
but it was supposed to have been a lot more than what we actually got. But it's still effective when they're on the cart and they're like, how do we slow it down? Where's it going? We don't know.
Yeah, I think of all the things to cut, I didn't mind that too much. I think it would have taken you too much out
A
of the
little bit
film.
too farcical.
Yeah,
almost.
it was already bordering on that.
I
and
was
that's
wondering
our one
why there was
sequence.
this whole minecart system in Alcatraz anyway.
It fitted the sequence where I had to roll through the fire and the rolling
Sure,
gears, and I'm
sure.
like, that doesn't make any sense. This doesn't make any sense. But I'll let those two things go.
It's a
because
great place for a gun battle.
I know they and the way they take out
John C. McGinley.
Yeah, John
I
C.
mean, again, it was a cut sequence where apparently Mason, because we see him we see him fighting with him. He sets fire to him, then he falls over, and then the next thing you know, he's tied up and stuck to the cart, and that was because Mason has impaled his hand to the cart with a knife in a graphic close-up, which was cut because it was deemed too gruesome, and then he obviously the cart gets severed and he drops into the water.
I mean, they made some interesting cuts to this, which I think it's the nature of film cutting. Much as it is an adult film in the kind of...
But I think they've also felt that it was out of character for Mason as well.
Yeah, well, Mason was pretty clean in his kills and he's the Bondy and honour.
Yes, yeah.
So there's kind of like
Bond. He rarely kills anybody with guns.
Yes.
He's either throwing them out of windows or impaling them with dropping crates or drowning them by dropping them into the water. It's lots of...
Or one neck break
a neck break. It's very inventive and it's always different. It's not just... bang, bang, you're dead.
Yes, yeah. Her Majesty's taught him well.
But it comes to a point where they've disabled most of the rockets. They've dispatched most of the Marines. And Ed Harris, he's had enough of this. And so they end up taking one of the tourists hostage. And they give them 3 minutes to give themselves up or they will execute the hostages. And so Sean Connery's just like, I got this. I'll go deal with General Hummel. And Nick Cage obviously goes off to go and deal with the other rocket.
Yeah.
And it's just that great moment. Like, it's one of the moments where we have Ed Harris and Sean Connery performing opposite each other. And then it's the sequence later where Sean Connery's like, yeah, I'm leaving the island. Like, General Hummel, he's not a murderer. He's not a killer.
Really
I read it in his eyes. He's bluffing.
Yeah, because at that point, Cage disarms one rocket but gets captured. And obviously Connery goes to distract to hopefully pull people away to let him find the remaining dockets around the island. Because they're down to 2 or 3 by that point.
Yeah.
I think Cage gets the second to last one, and then they're both captured.
Yeah.
Oh no, there's two left at that point. Yeah, he gets the third to last one, and then there's 2 left. One of which we'll get to in a moment. But the moment with the conversations, just because it slips back into the philosophy of patriotism and such, and you kind of go Connery, a man who's clearly suffered for loyalty to his government, who betrayed him to some extent, because they're like, we never sent someone to steal any files from the head of the FBI. Why would we do that? What on earth could he have on film that would be important enough for us to go steal?
Cloak and dagger shit.
Yeah. So I mean, it's the kind of quiet discussion of whether or not espionage justifies total secrecy. But if you sign up for that, surely you know that, and that's kind of the price you pay. It's not fair, but you probably know that when you enter the deal, as it were. So again, it's kind of Ed Harris is furious that they're not honouring that deal. Not, at least not even quietly get behind the scenes going, here's some medals, here's some cash, nobody needs to know why they got these things. Thank you, good night. Any admittance of any of that is a sign that something's happened that they shouldn't have happened, or at least shouldn't be known to have happened.
Yeah.
And again,
it's getting to the point where the deadline that they've given the government to pay up the money is arriving, And of course, you've got the two trigger-happy soldiers that are just like, let's prep the missiles, let's launch them.
And they're beginning to wind up Ed Harris's character with it. While at the same time, the government are like, we've got those thermite rockets looking like they're ready to roll.
But they're not ready yet.
No. But
and they've also lost contact with Goodspeed and Mason on Alcatraz. They don't know if they're alive or not.
Yeah.
And so, the tension really builds up. And Ed Harris is like, okay, yeah, launch the missile. And they launch the missile, and you see it flying over, and you see everybody panicking as it's flying over the football stadium. Yeah. And Ed Harris is like, and he sends the missile to detonate underwater.
Yeah, crash land in the ocean.
Which then, of course, triggers the angry soldiers who end up at a Mexican standoff with him.
His major, because there's so many characters here. We're not going to cover every single one, but you got the two kind of volatile captains.
Yeah.
Plus you've got Ed Harris and his major played by David Morse. And they essentially, the major is angry with Ed Harris because he knows they've fucked up.
Yes.
And he's having a conflict with Ed Harris's character because they are veterans of a long campaign.
Yeah.
They are the two oldest soldiers that fought together. And you get this wonderful...
It's the betrayal, isn't it? Where he's just like, I'm sorry, General, and he puts the gun to his friend's head.
Yes, and you think he's been betrayed. And at this point, Mason and Goodspeed have just broken out because of trade secrets, where he basically breaks them both out of these cells they've been held in Alcatraz in. And they're watching this Mexican standoff unfold. And it's obviously going badly for the Major General.
He was gunned down, although his friend... He was kind of double bluffing. Although in the original script he wasn't. They kind of changed it when they got on set and was filming it, and it feels better that way.
Yeah, because it makes more sense how he, in a sense, a young private working for the two renegade, evil captains. 'Cause I hate to make it that simplistic, but they're a bit psychotic. He gets gunned down along with the major. Ed Harris gets riddled with bullets while the other two captains make a run for it.
But they get to find out when they pull General Hummel away from the gunfight. He tells them where the final rocket is, in the lower lighthouse. And so then it's just a desperate fight to get to the lower lighthouse and stop the missile before it takes off.
Yes, although this is the point where the VX gas doesn't make as much sense as it was explained earlier in the film. But we'll get to that in a moment. But you then end up with them splitting up with... Connery's character remaining behind to hold off one of the captains while off runs Goodspeed to get to the next missile, which he does.
You see him pull out the strip of all the VX gas. He pulls the chip out, but he's pursued by one of these other psychotic...
And it's the first time one of the VX chains of these beautiful diamonds, just one pops off. And rolls away,
and of course it bounces off his shoe, doesn't it? But he manages to grab hold of it, and then when he's wrestling with that other psychotic soldier, he ends up forcing it into his mouth, into his face,
and then uppercutting him,
and of course he ends up stabbing himself in the heart with that needle. And you're just like, man, it was like you get to see his face burning away. Of course, you saw one of the other soldiers at the beginning of the film locked in with the gas and seeing the horrific side effects of it.
And that's where the major, Ed Harris's number 2, kind of stares at the dying soldier until they leave. And you kind of get the empathy with these men are genuinely not the bad guys.
They care for each other,
That's the major and the brigadier general. Both are good men, essentially.
But Tony Todd also gets a pretty good death. Where he's like, you ever heard of Elton John's The Rocket Man? Well, that's you. You're the Rocket Man. And he fires the rocket right out the window.
I know, and it's funny because, again, it's the Cage's musical references because, again, he's buying a really expensive Beatle album earlier in the film.
Well, he was listening to Elton John's Rocket Man earlier in the film as well. So
it's all just references to, again, giving depth to Goodspeed's kind of interests, which, again...
Good setups, good payoffs. It all comes together.
Well, yeah.
But then, of course, they've already launched... the fighter jets with the napalm to wipe out Alcatraz.
And Goodspeed remembers in the nick of time.
He hears the echo. It's like when the mission's complete, launch the green flares.
Yeah, after spasming, trying to not die to a minor dose, I'll assume, because the wind was going in the right direction of VX gas. Like we said, it was a bit vague at this point.
Again, it's just another emotional build-up as the jets are flying in. I think it was Jim Caviezel is actually one of the fighter jet pilots. Obviously, like a very non-minor role for him in this.
Yeah, and you've got the Cage on his knees with the two flares in the air. It's just like very dramatic, music rising, scores going berserk.
Yeah. And the bomb drops because one of the firefighters didn't see the
FBI
signal.
spotters are like, hold a sec, we got the green flares,
I've already launched the payload.
Oh, it's just so good.
Giant explosion as Alcatraz erupts in flames.
And off flies Nick Cage into the water.
Yeah, but then the melody picks up again as Mason jumps into the water to save him and saves his life.
Yeah, drags him to safety. And it's a pretty cool finale.
He reports back to the FBI that John Mason was vaporized.
Yeah, because Mason hands him the mic and he's just like, yeah, Mason died. Then there's William Forsythe's character, Special Agent in Charge, William Paxton, who basically has been throughout the film, because he's essentially the third FBI agent of note.
Yeah.
Because you've got the head of FBI and you've got the Special Agent in Charge of the San Francisco area who's running the operation. Or at least the FBI side of it. The military side of it's also... They're all working together. And he obviously meets up at the very end and goes, Mason died in napalm. And you kind of get a smirk on his face. Like he's
he knows he's being jibbed here.
Yeah, but again, there's a slight dumbness to the head of the director. Who's like, really?
The body can do that?
He can be vaporized? I want to see his body, because there's a bit of a vindictive edge to this character.
Yeah.
And it is, again, it's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek villain. He is the lighter-hearted villain of the piece.
Yeah.
It's like, it can be vaporized.
Yeah.
And obviously then they conclude with a kind of...
With the just married as they're escaping this...
we forgot to mention where they're going for their wedding, though.
Yes.
Because...
Yeah, Mason gave them the slip of paper saying, you want to see that microfilm? Basically,
go to this little
find
church somewhere in the backwaters of America and rip off the front leg of a pew that's hollow, and you'll find a microfilm.
And the final line is, hey, honey, you want to know who really shot JFK? You're like, it's such a brilliant moment. It's
light-hearted, again. It's got that kind of...
It's playful.
Yeah, the whole film's playful. I think that's the way to truly put it. It deals with some darker and more meaningful military-related politics.
Yeah.
And like we said, that there's dramatic sequences, heroic sequences, tragic sequences.
Yeah. It's a mixture of so many different elements, but it's all been blended really, really well.
Because like the Ed Harris wrestling with the morality of it, you keep coming to Ed Harris and he's never happy because he's in the damned situation of damned if you do, damned if you don't. He's the true man in a rock and a hard place.
Yes, yeah. Well, Jess, what are your favourite scenes from The Rock?
This is one film where it's hard to pin it all down. It's all my favourite because you take any sequence out and it's either maybe the over the top at times, wonderful action sequence, or an actually quite well put together dramatic sequence.
Yeah.
Because as I said, the drama's great. It's going to probably, I hope to say it, and I'm sure you'll say it too, is the shower sequence. Because it is the pinnacle of the film where it hits you the hardest. It's dramatic, it's tactically absolute in its kind of like, you know who's going to win this standoff. But the tragedy is there. It's tragic, it's tense, and it's just that the conversation between, again, it's the drama and the action woven together the most purely in that film, because it's the conversation with Ed Harris and Michael Bihn's character that really defines the whole narrative. Because you've got it being listened in on by the main characters, both Connery and Cage's characters in a sewer just below this are going on. So the drama and who they are. And that's kind of why I think you end up understanding why Connery's character later wants to meet Harris's character, because it connects them, because he understands, like, I know why you're doing this. This is foolishness. I think, and he insults Harris at that point and calls him a fool, and he gets pistol whipped.
He said it's an act of lunacy.
Yeah, an act of lunacy. And again, he's they're both quoting different. Harris quotes like.
He talks about patriotism
and the Tree of Liberty needs. Trimming from time to time. I'm murdering that quote. Apologies. Yeah. And then you get a counter quote from Connery, and again he's just quoting some other philosophy on patriotism being a fool's game. Yeah. And you've kind of got that argument.
It is a clash of ideologies and beliefs, and it's really well written and portrayed. And it just
there is a majesty to that moment where Connery steps down the steps, and kind of like. Unarmed, just like, but it's Connery. Connery has a screen presence which is undeniable, and he's missed because honestly, there was a sequel plan for this.
Oh, there was,
and that's one thing it was only never properly penned, and it was going to be following Mason, And obviously, it was only mentioned a few years ago.
No, it was gonna follow Goodspeed, who is now being hounded by the FBI because he has the microfilm and he has to find Mason, and Mason will help him try to hide from the FBI.
Yeah, no, I mean Mason was on the run as well. I think as they figure out Mason's alive. Sorry, because again, it would have involved both the main actors again, but obviously time rolled on way past. Connery's action years. And hell, it rolled on too far for Indiana Jones because he didn't want to come out of retirement to return as Elder Jones, even though he should have been immortal from that. No, let's not even think that. But yeah, that sequence of shower is probably my favourite, but there's so many others dotted throughout that. It's just snappy dialogue, snappy cuts. What do you think?
Oh yeah, the shower sequence, without a doubt. It's not just the best sequence in the film. It's one of the best sequences in a lot of action movies.
Pure drama action movies.
Yeah, they nailed it perfectly.
You compare it to films like Die Hard, where you look at the sequence where Hans is thrown out of the window.
Yeah,
which is again, there's more hammy, and a lot of that there's not hammy in a bad way because it doesn't go too far in like Die Hard, but those action sequences don't have the kind of gravitas and punch of ideology and good men killing good men.
Right.
Which is the tragedy in that sequence.
Absolutely, yeah. I also think that the first 5 minutes of this film is also fantastic. It just sets the mood, the tension, the characters, the location effortlessly with great cinematography, minimal dialogue. It just really gets you in the mindset for what's
Harris
to come.
takes off his wedding ring, puts it in a bowl.
Yeah, it's really well done. I love the "what do you want me to do, kill him again" moment. There's so many great lines of dialogue, like "you're best, winners go home and fuck the prom queen." You know?
And that's being Goodspeed's character is being berated. It's like, I went home and married the prom queen.
Exactly, yeah. Carla was the prom queen.
Yeah. So
I always remember the line, "I'll take pleasure in gutting you, boy."
Oh, that's where Cage does a bit of a wacky one, because he takes that line and then just
rolls with it.
When he's in the jail cell trapped, it's just like, you got him, boy. I'm trapped in a prison but with a bunch of macho lunatics. And he's right to a degree, because that particular villain later comes back and hunts him down, which he then dispatches. Oh, no.
Yeah, he gets thrown out a window as well.
He's the Rocket Man.
Yeah.
And again, the Rocket Man, as you said, the punchy one-liners are just so sharp.
They are. So, Jess, do you recommend The Rock?
Resoundingly. I mean, of all those popcorn action films, this is top-tier stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think the critics liked it as much as the fan base, but it made a lot of money, and it was always... I think nobody I speak to says it isn't amazing. It is honestly one of the best 90s action films out there.
For sure.
Made by the team that made a great chain of 90s action films.
Oh, hell yeah. That's why this film is an easy recommendation for me. If you're looking for insane action set pieces with edge-of-your-seat moments with some great writing and quality performances, this is a must-watch. It's thoroughly entertaining with a quick pace, great camera work, and mixed with a fantastic soundtrack. It's one of Hans Zimmer's best. It's the main theme. It's easily recognizable. I'd say this ranks as one of the best action films ever made. It just never gets old no matter how many times I rewatch it. Ed Harris was also just fantastic as the morally troubled general, who wasn't just a clone supervillain. It was a great performance. I wish Michael Biehn had more screen time leading into the shower room sequences, which were some of the most memorable sequences in the film. Of course, Sir Sean Connery was absolutely charming, charismatic, and elevated every actor around him. They all developed these characters, which heightened the drama and the stakes brilliantly. It's a Michael Bay masterpiece, and if you've never seen this often overlooked 90s action film, you could do worse. It's a high recommendation. It's an action-packed adrenaline rush. Pure escapism. I love it. Thanks for watching Off the Shelf Reviews.
You made a terrible mistake, and more of our brothers have died in vain. Damn you for forcing me into this position.